Hi, choose me. I'll tell you why he bought this. For the same reason El Chapo would buy it. For the same reason El Mayo would buy it. It's really great for dissolving of evidence. And here's the thing, I am a scholar, right? Which means that I did a bunch of research on conflict, both theoretical, educational, but also just experience, right? And when it comes to a difference between the habits of those who participate in such actions and the CTELs, we recognize that their choice and doing that was seen through an environmental factor, right? When we think of cannibalism, right? The ones who are being forced to take part in the operations are numbed, and that means using methods like forcing them to, cook, to eat, and stuff, right? So it is forced, right? It isn't optional. It isn't a choice. Here, what we're talking about is a choice, right? A choice of them wanting to eat certain things, a choice of them wanting to take care of bodies in different ways. But this was done not because they believe that they did them wrong through, say, enemies, right? Enemies or what's perceived to be an enemy, right? What this is their victims. They know it's their victims, and usually CTELs, we're not including those like Losetas, conduct these type of behaviors against folks they believe are their enemies. This isn't their enemies. This is to dispose of victims. So we have to acknowledge that they believe they won't get caught. They believe they won't get consequences. They believe that you won't find that evidence, right? They believe that because they took measures, but also because who controls the government right now? Who controls the DOJ right now? Who controls the FBI right now? And I've never felt so confident in my choice to not go to law school because doing international law as post grad, it taught me that the rule of law was insufficient to rise to this unprecedented conflict, especially when it is mass scale, conducted by various people or individuals or entities. Because if you actually hold that accountable, you may collapse a system which a nation may depend on, right? Which is exactly why we bailed out in 2008 the banks, right? Because if they collapse, the union collapsed. So we had to help them, right? So in this instance, if we give actual justice across the various fields, across the various companies, across the various industries, right, including government, then the system will collapse. So, in order to keep the union, we have to sacrifice justice, we have to sacrifice fairness, we have to sacrifice our constitution. And I tell you, is that a worthy deal for you? Because here, we have to understand that law isn't about morals or ethics, it is about rules and regulations. And if you believe yourself to be a good lawyer, like Pam Bondi, I'm sure, does, law isn't about following the law, it's about finding ways to justify you going outside the law, right? That is what criminal attorneys who defend those who are actually guilty. But I mean, as long as the evidence can be presented in a way or evidence is lacking, then you can get your person out, right? Because justice in under law isn't necessarily about justice as me and you see it, but it's about fairness, right? The laws, rules applying across the board, and if the evidence doesn't align with those rules, then you cannot actually do much with that. That's what they're depending on, right? Authoritarian law. And I need to recognize that you cannot use authoritarian law to get outside of authoritarian law. And the fact that we keep thinking that congressional hearings, right, will be sufficient, it's important, it's critical, not sufficient, right? That lawsuits will be sufficient is critical, important, not sufficient, right? Because law is about following rules. Those rules don't have to be moral or ethical, right? They just have to either exist or not. Is there a rule against a president touching children? No. Which means that technically he doesn't have to be impeached for that, because technically we can have a president because there was nothing prohibiting it, right? Which is where my trust in law fell apart, right? And it's important, right? And I'm not criticizing all lawyers, right? Because being a lawyer is an important job, right? But it's not a job that was meant for me. And that's okay, because I couldn't do this. And I couldn't stand around and accept superior orders, right? Because you have to be in obedience to superior orders. That's legal ethics, that's professional ethics, right? If I knew that that was wrong, right? Which means that I would be a bad lawyer. I would be a wrong lawyer, right? Especially under authoritarianism. And I need us to recognize that we have to decenter the rule of law from the way that America functions, because the reason why the United States has not held to account the people within the files like other nations is because we believe that the truth itself is just sufficient. We don't actually need consequences, right? Because those consequences weren't already established, which means that technically we cannot hold them accountable for what wasn't position to be held into account. That is the same thing the Yatis believe, and they didn't get away with it. At least most of them actually did. Actually, Operation Paperclip in the United States, they went to Brazil, they went to Argentina. Even the Confederates, they were allowed to fly the Confederate flag right now. So we don't have actual transitional justice. We don't have actual healing. We don't have actual resolution. And I need you to understand that the nation in which we are, the nation that we were, is not the nation that we should continue to be.